Hi there, Phil Simborg for the USBGF with a very interesting bearing in problem. Score is 11 away, blue's holding a 2 cube, and red has to play a 4-2. It won't take you very long to come up with two possible plays that make sense. One is to make the 4 point, and the other is to make the bar point. Which one do you prefer? Anything else we won't even talk about. You can pause this recording, take your time, and then come back. Okay, well, one of the things that I've learned is not to just jump to conclusions. Both plays look good. One of them might have jumped out at you right away. But the best thing to do is to actually move the checkers, make the play, and see which one looks better. Unlike chess, we're allowed to do that in backgammon. Some people don't believe that should be the rule. I happen to like it, and most people do. One of the problems with moving the checkers, by the way, and moving them back is the possibility that you might move them back wrong. It happens. It happens. Even honest mistakes happen, but it's funny how the honest mistakes usually seem to work to the advantage of the player making them. And it's not because they're cheaters. It's because your mind sort of wants you to put it back right. So I've recommended a rule, and it's being adopted pretty much universally, that if you do make a tentative move, for example, if you were going to move and make the 7 point and think about it, don't put both checkers against the rail. Move them out a little bit. You can't do that, of course, online, but move them out a little bit so you can see at least which two checkers have been moved. That doesn't guarantee that you're going to move them back to the right place, but at least it helps assure that you're going to move the right checkers. Or if you were thinking about moving the 4 here, I would put the 4 instead of against the rail, put it here. If you're thinking about moving the 4 from the 9 to the 5, don't put it up against these checkers, put it out away from them a little bit. In fact, I'm hoping that the rule will be that if you don't do that, once you do put it against the other checkers or against the rail, then you can no longer put it back. I think that's the way the rule should be eventually, but we're doing it as a step in the meantime until people get used to it. So anyway, in online you can't do that. So let's take a look at making this point. The obvious advantage of making this point is you're not leaving him any shots. There's no way to get hit here. The obvious disadvantage is that you haven't made your 4 point. This is going to haunt you. You're going to have problems later on. And there's another major problem with this. You have now put two checkers on the toughest place to clear. Later on, I'm sure you've seen this playing quite often. You might get down to these two checkers here, and when you roll the 6-5, you're dead. Or when you start rolling sixes and other numbers, even if it's not a 6-5, if it's a 6-4, 6-3, you're moving checkers deeper into your board, and eventually now 5 and 4 could hurt you, and other numbers could hurt you. So there's a real disadvantage in making this point and a real disadvantage of keeping that point open. Let's look at the other play. Obviously, you don't have the problem of clearing the 7 point. Obviously, you don't have this hole remaining. But you're taking a major risk here. What if he rolls a 6-2 or a 6-4? Well, what is that risk? That's 4 out of 36. 1 out of 36 is about 2.78%, or a little less than 3%. I'm not that good at math, so when I have 4 out of 36, I just multiply times 3 and reduce it by about 10%, because 2.78, which is 1/36, is about 10% less than 3%. So if I haven't confused you enough already with my shortcut, basically what I'm saying is 4 out of 36 is 4 times 3 is 12, and I take off about 10% of 12 and make it about 11. So about 11% of the time you're going to get hit. And that means that 90% of the time you don't. Now, the 11% of the time that you get hit, do you lose? Heck no. You might roll a 3. Or you might come in with a 1 or a 2 and hit the remaining checker. Or come in with a 1 or a 2 and hit the checker that might still be sitting out here, possibly. So there is life after death. So let's assume that you get hit 11% and you lose, say, 3/4 of those. That means you're only losing about 7% of the time as a result of leaving these shots. So that's your risk. Do you think that you are gaining more than 7% as opposed to making that point? Do you think you're going to be more than 7% worse off with the other play by making this point and having the 4 point open? Well, experience tells me the answer is yes. This is much worse. And if you're not sure, and by the way, I wasn't sure the first time I saw this. I leaned towards the right play. I often ask my students to put a number between 1 and 10 on how sure they are of the play. Well, when I first made the play, I was about a 7. And I know that if I'm less than a 9, I better spend a lot more time studying the play before I just pick up the dice. And by the way, when I think I'm an 8 or a 9 or a 10 and I turn out to be wrong, then I know I've found a real hole in my thinking. I know I've really missed something and I need to put in more study that way too. Let's quit fiddling around and see what the boss says. I always hit the plus button. It's the highest evaluation you can get with extreme gammon other than doing a rollout, and you'll see that it's a blunder. It's in red. That means it's a blunder. It's more than an 8% error, which is how we define blunder with extreme gammon. Of course, you can change it. You can set the threshold to anything you want, but 8% is pretty much the standard. It's a pretty big mistake. You lose the game about this. What to see what these numbers mean. If you make the right play, you win the game 82% of the time instead of 80% of the time. By the way, you win gammons 5% more by making the right play. So wins and gammons are the two reasons why you make that play. Now, will you get gammon more? You go from about a 0.5% to about 0.6 to 0.12. So it's pretty negligible what happens on the downside. That's what these numbers mean. This is what the opponent gets out of the roll. That's what the O means. And this is what the player making the play gets out of the roll. That's what this means. By the way, for those of you who have extreme gammon, if you don't see these numbers, it's because you haven't changed the settings. For example, if you go to display display winning percent as, many of you have this graphic bar, which some people like, but and when you put your mouse over it, you can see exactly what is going on. But I like to not have to put the mouse over it, and I like to see these actual numbers, which I think most good players do. So you right-click, go to Display Winning Percent as Values, and you'll see wins, gammons, and backgammons for the player and for the opponent, and the difference between the two plays, the amount of the error it would have been to make the 7.097. So this is a way to evaluate plays like that. In the bottom line, you're going to have to make your own best judgment as to whether or not you can definitively guess about how much this cost you. It's hard to definitively guess how much you gain by making the 4-point, by not having it open, and whether or not you lose more as a result of it. But you can tell for sure by asking extreme gammon, which is not going to be wrong in these situations, and then back into the logic and back into the reasoning and come up with the thinking about it. And once you do that, you can apply that to many more situations in the future. Hope you found this interesting and enlightening, and thanks for your support of the USBGF. Bye-bye.